Right, we're now going to come on to the second introductory game of this chapter, the Advanced Variation. I think this is another game which shows Black's typical ideas in a very good light. It was played between Grischuk, had the white pieces. I know he used to play the Advanced French on a regular basis, and he was playing Nigel Short, obviously one of Britain's best ever players. I was very impressed with the way Short played this game. He completely destroyed Grischuk with the black pieces, and it shows some very nice ideas the way he played this. So I think it's well worth noting his style of play in this line. So it started obviously e4, e6, d4, d5, e5, c5, c3, knight to c6, knight to f3, and now bishop to d7. So this is a move, as I mentioned before, I'm going to recommend. And I think this game really demonstrates why I want to keep the queen on d8. I mentioned before that I think bishop to e2 is White's best move here, but in this game Grischuk played a3, which I think is clearly inferior move, this a3 move. White's plan is to play the move b4, but he never really has time to get this move in because of Black's reply to this move a3. He should have been trying to get his pieces developed in the meantime. So after a3, what should Black play here? Well, he has two sort of decent ideas, but his next move is very typical for the French in general. And I'm going to give this move an exclamation mark in any analysis I have done in the past because it's such a good move. Black plays f6, so a very good move, immediately attacking White's central pawn formation. And I'd go as far to say that I think Black's at least equal already in this position after f6, because White's centre can actually fall apart very quickly. So f6, a very good move from Nigel. Bishop to d3 was now played. The other possibility here is b4, but we'll come back to this in the theory section. Bishop to d3 is Grischuk's choice in this position. And now Nigel played queen to c7. So you can note how I've left my queen on d8. So I have not lost the tempo by going queen to b6. In the f6 line, when you play this move s6, the queen is actually better on c7 to intensify the pressure on White's pawn on e5. Now, what should Black's general ideas be in this position here? Well, you might get this position if you play this Advanced French quite a lot of times. So Black's general idea here is to castle queenside. The king's actually much better placed on the queen side here. So once the king is on the queen side, Black can start pushing his kingside pawns down towards White. So you can play g5, f5, this type of idea. Other ideas that Black has here, which we'll see in this game, is to play h6 and g5. Maybe this can be combined with h6, f5 and g5. So there's another typical idea. Other ideas, well, sometimes Black actually plays knight to h6, back around to f7. Because now that White's weak point is not d4 anymore, White's weak point is the e5 square. So we've got to think, how can we intensify pressure on the e5 square? Well, knight to h6 is another typical idea. Another thing that Black can consider playing, well, once he is castled, it's his typical manoeuvre with the light square bishop, exactly what Nigel Short does in this game. We'll come to it in a minute. Bishop to e8 to h5. A very nice plan. Well, let's move on and see how these came about in this game. So queen to c7, White's castle kingside. So Black just castles, gets his king safe as well. Grischuk played queen to e2. And here, Black's got a number of moves, but I like the way Nigel played this position. Nigel just went h6. So he's preparing to play f5, and then he's going to play g5. So White's king is on the king side, so Black's going to pawn storm it with his pawns. And in general, Black's pawn storm is much more dangerous than White's pawn storm. We'll come to that in a minute. So this h6 idea in this particular variation is well worth remembering, just to get g5 in. So h6, White's played b4, trying to create some counterplay on the queen side. Well, Black should obviously not capture the pawn on b4, because this would open up the a1 rook after a takes b4. If you're castled on one part of the board, you try to keep that area of the board as closed as possible. So after b4, Black plays pawn to c4, keeping the position closed. Bishop to c2, and now Nigel plays f5. So he's, rather than putting the pressure on e5 now, his way of thinking is basically, well, okay, white's quite well defending the pawn on e5, so I'm going to change my plan. I'm just going to push my pawns on the king side up towards white's king. I'm going to combine this pawn side push with the bishop maneuver, bishop to e8, bringing around my light squared bishop to a much better square, bishop to e8 to h5. Typical, nice idea. And I think black's already better here, so let's see how it developed. Bishop c2, f5. White's played knight to h4. So white's trying to come into g6. So black plays bishop to e8. So he's getting ready to play g5, kicking the white knight back. So white plays f4 himself. So move f4 is acting against g5. But the problem with this position that white has is that it's a very closed position. His chance of attacking the king side, the queen side, are minimum, because it's very easy for black up to block up the queen side attack. While black's always got this one break g5. It might take a while for black to get this break in, but there's no way that white's going to be able to stop it. As soon as black plays g5, he's going to open up some lines against white's king. So black immediately prepares it, bishop to e7. And now, in a bad position, white lashed out. He played knight takes f5. I mean, we kind of really covered the main points of the opening here, so we don't need to go too much further in it. We can say that black is better here, and it's been a success, the opening. Basically, his plan of going queen to c7 combined with h6 and f5 has been very good here. I mean, Grischuk played knight takes f5. We'll have a quick look at the remaining moves, but I mean, if he'd have gone knight to f3 here, removing his knight back to the f3 square, then black just plays this knight bishop to h5 idea. A very typical move. This bishop is pinning the knight on f3 to the queen, and black's preparing to play g5 himself. So white's in a lot of trouble. When black gets the g5 move in, it's only black who's got all the play. White hasn't got any play at all. So, okay, well, let's have a look at some more moves, because it was quite an entertaining finish. So, in this position, white played knight takes f5. Pawn takes f5, bishop takes f5 check, king to b8, queen to g4. This is a bad move. White should have retreated his bishop somewhere, because then he can move his f-pawn to f5 and create a bit of counterplay. It's not going to be enough, but it's a little bit of counterplay. So queen to g4, another mistake that Grischuk has played. g5, a good idea. Breaking up the open lines on the king side and breaking up this pawn structure. F takes g5, H takes g5. So when you're attacking at opposite sides of the boards, it's often a good idea to sacrifice a pawn to open up lines on this side of the board. Exactly what Nigel does here. Bishop takes g5. So now black's got the open H and G lines to attack the white king along. Bishop to h5. Pieces are starting to come to life. Queen to g3. Black just plays very simple chess here. He eliminates his bishop on g5 because now he's getting himself the e7 square for his knight on g8. So bishop takes g5. Queen takes g5. Knight to e7. And black's developed his last piece and is ready to go rook on d to g8 with a winning position. It's clear to say that black is very close to victory here. Okay, white's got 3 pawns for the piece, but he's not going to be able to defend his king side. When the rook on d comes over, black might even consider capturing this bishop on f5 so he can bring his bishop on h5 around. Well, let's, for entertainment value, we'll see the end. Knight to d2, rook on d to g8, queen to e3, and, well, black did take off this bishop on f5. Knight takes f5, rook takes f5, queen to h7, bringing another piece around, and obviously we're x-raying the pawn on h2 here. It's quite funny, I think I mentioned before in the Shirov game, as soon as black's light square bishop comes into the game in the French defence, it's normally a sign that black's doing very well here, and this is typically the case here. Black's light square bishop has become a very good piece. It's outside the pawn structure, and it might even come in on the b1 h7 diagonal here. So, very nice piece. The game is basically effectively over here. Rook to f6, and now black played the nice bishop to e2, and we'll stop here. I'll just mention that, well, in the game Grischuk played h3, but after bishop to d3, black really had taken control of the whole board. This bishop's so strong, and the knight's coming around. Knight to e7 to f5 is bringing the last black piece into the game. If after bishop to e2, white had captured this bishop on e2, well, this is going to run into a lot of trouble. White's going to lose his queen after queen takes h2 check. And now, if king to f1, queen to h1 check, king to f2, rook takes g2 check. And black's going to win a lot of material here. So a very nice game there from Nigel. He just made this opening against a3 look very good. So if white doesn't play 6 bishop to e2, if white plays an early a3, because you've left your queen on d8, you should play a quick f6 with the idea of going queen to c7 and castling queenside. A plan well worth remembering. I think those 2 introductory games were very good introductory games, and they gave us a very good impression of how black should play the advanced French.